Well, just to sort of explain what the feasibility study is all about, what the sovereignty and education grant is about, as well as all this. It's about improving outcomes, because this is what it's all about at the end of the day. So part of the discussion about the feasibility study, as well as the sovereignty grant, is trying to develop a school reform plan for all of our schools about how can we work together to improve outcomes. And what drives a lot of this is data, and data is always important. It's always important to know where your students stand, where your schools stand. Do people in Crown Point know how your schools are performing compared to other schools? Because what all this is about trying to change the direction of our education system for our future, so that we don't leave a whole generation of young people without a great education. And so this is what the main purpose of all what we're trying to go through this is about. And it's based on a couple laws that you're probably familiar with. 100-297 if you're a grant school, and 93-638, and some of these are the laws. And again, the purpose is about trying to improve educational outcomes for students, revitalizing language and culture, improving the efficiencies within our schools. And the feasibility study team talked about some of these other areas, about HR, finance, and all this stuff, but how all this makes sense is knowing the education status of some of our schools. And that's always important to know about. How can we change our system for the better? And these are some of the goals. And so the system that we have in NAVO is it's a highly fragmented system. Within Doty, we deal primarily with tribal grant schools. And the way each school system operates is that they operate as their own individual mini school district. So you have, at least with the grant schools, you have 34 different HR systems, personnel systems, 34 different curriculums or lack thereof. Whether or not it's aligned to standards, that's another issue. Then there's issues of school governance and academics. And what you see within this system, which is what this is that you have schools that are all over the place in terms of student achievement, student outcomes. And so when you have like a system where you have 34 different systems, you get wildly different outcomes, even though the students they have the same background, same demographics, and so on. And so what we're trying to develop with the feasibility study, with the sovereignty and education grant, is a much more uniform system of how we can improve outcomes. And these are just some of the issues that we currently have within NAVO education, about some of the challenges that we face, whether it's with grant schools in particular, such as low performance schools. And we'll go through the data so you can actually see what this whole conversation is about. We have excessive turnover within staff, which also has an impact in the classroom. You have a lot of conflicts of interest, nepotism, favoritism, all the isms that you can think of. That seems to happen a lot within our schools. And the other thing that we've seen within NAVO education is a lot of politics, a lot of politics, factions at the chapter level, the community level. When you have a system that's the way it is, all that goes into our schools where the focus, which it should be on student outcomes achievement, is oftentimes, it's the last thing on a school's priority list. And these are some of the current results, and this is for BIE operated schools, in addition to tribal grant schools. They're all considered to be part of this factor, and this comes off the Government Accountability Report of how BIE students nationally perform in contrast to other students. And this is test scores and data as a whole for all Arizona grant schools based on AIMS, Arizona, the instrument for measurement. This is how Arizona schools perform as a whole for all the tribal grant schools. And this does not include the BIE schools. And this is our reading test scores. And this is what the proficiency rates are in terms of math, of how Arizona grant schools perform compared to the other schools. And these numbers are what these schools under No Child Left Behind should be striving for as far as the AMOs. These are what is considered making adequate yearly progress. And as you can see, for the past 10 plus years, the numbers have stayed at a very, very low level, which if you're a parent, this is very concerning. And this is what the rates are for New Mexico grant schools. And that includes schools here in the Crown Point area, down toward Borrego Pass or Tohatchee. All these schools, this is what the average proficiency rates are. As you can see, it took a big drop over the past year. And that's reading. And this is what the test scores are for math. And this is a school-by-school comparison of all the tribal grant schools, starting from Kindakachi, Shanto, all these schools all the way to Loop at the other end. And this is what the 3-year trend has been in terms of student achievement. And this is what the proficiency rates in reading are in New Mexico for the tribal grant schools. And you see, you have Sassy, you have Torreon, you have Sassy, Shiprock Northwest, Ramo, Pine Hill, Zetnadith, Choshke, Borrego Pass, and Alamo. And this is what the scores have been. And again, this is the New Mexico Standards-Based Assessment. And as you can see, this is what the navigation, the Department of Dine Education is concerned about. Is we're trying to reverse and change this trend. And this is what the Arizona math scores are on a school-by-school basis for over the past 3 years. And this is what math scores are for the New Mexico grant schools. And if from Crown Point, you can see how schools in this area are performing compared to some of the other schools. And this is what we also found interesting as we proceeded with the study, the feasibility study, of how do BIE schools perform compared to grant schools on a state-by-state basis. This is kind of interesting that in Arizona BIE schools are outperforming the Arizona grant schools. Same assessment, same test. New Mexico is also matching the same trend as well. So what's interesting is when you look at this kind of data is that these students all are pretty much the same. They're from the same demographic. They live out in the most rural parts of the reservation, or they live in the same town, same community. But what is it that this system is doing different than this group to improve outcomes? And this is what math scores are on a state-by-state basis of BIE schools versus grant schools. Yeah, exactly. And of course, for us, it's how do we replicate systems like this that work, or doing what's in the best interest of students, and so that we ensure that students are succeeding, doing well. And this is like when you look down Highway 491. These students are pretty much all the same. They live out in the most rural parts. They live up in the mountain. But this school, Newcomb Elementary, one of the best performing elementary schools in all of Northwest New Mexico. Are they any different than, let's say, students that are, let's say in Tohatchee or Twin Lakes or Navajo? And this is the same comparison along that same area. What is it that one school is doing different than the others, where you have the same entirely different outcome? And some of the comments I think that came up is, do these students face any more or far greater challenges than let's say, students who live just 20 miles down the highway? Exactly, highly effective teachers. And this is the same result for Newcomb. And what's interesting is these are the big city schools that have more advantages than you can think of. They have the jobs, they have the parks, recreation, they have the internet. And then you have these are the schools that are probably not that far apart. But what is it that one school that is in the same neighborhood that is doing different than the other schools that have much better results, improved results? And this is one of the other interesting case studies that we also looked at with this feasibility study. And everyone probably knows where Tuba City is at, right? And it's safe to say that these schools are all from the same, they're all close together. They're across the street, down the street. And students from this community, they probably play together. They play ball, they have grown up together, played together. But what is it that this school, the Tuba City Boarding School, is doing different than, let's say, this school, the public school, and this is the tribal grant school? And again, if you just sort of think about it, all these students, they have the same demographic. They probably have the same home life, same challenges that they face at home, but in this case, you have one school system that is doing things better than the others that we would like to see happen at other places across our nation. And this is what their math scores are, the same test, same assessment.
But you gotta be careful, when you have BIE schools up there, you also have to be careful in the type of test that you can't compare apples to oranges. I know that Arizona gives a different test, and so does the state of New Mexico. So we gotta look at that too.
Oh, I agree, but the test in that case is actually the same test, it's aimed.
I mean, I see BIE up there, but we're in New Mexico, and we're taking a different test.
Oh, yes, but in this case, it's just looking at aims in this case.
It's the same thing, yeah.
I understand your test, but
That's the same test.
overall, I kind of feel uncomfortable about
Yeah.
being.
Well, and that's why we want you to unify your planning. So you do not have this conversation anymore about, is the same knowledge occurring in different places?
And of course, this is the other question that we went about as we proceeded with the study is, how much are we spending on education? Are we spending a lot? Are we spending too little? And we think that with test scores being where they are, we're not spending enough. But this is the other interesting tidbit that came up is how much is being spent, in this case, just with the tribal grant schools. And because that's actually one of the essential elements of education reform is finding out how the money's being spent. And this is actually one of the numbers that came up about how much is being spent. And this is excluding a couple schools that did not submit audits, which of course is another issue. But with that school system, the average per student expenditure is almost $22,000 per student. And these are what the other numbers are for the other schools, other states. And this is the other report that also came out with how certain states spend, how much they spend on education. As you can see, New York is right up there, DC Public Schools, Vermont. This information comes from the Teachers Union, the NEA, the National Education Association, and this comes off the U.S. Census Bureau. And as you can see, the common, or the state that's here is New Mexico. They're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of spending. Arizona, Utah are toward the bottom. So the question that I think everybody, every policymaker, every parent should sort of be asking is, if we're spending all this money on education with at least what we got here, shouldn't we have better outcomes? Because this whole process about what we're trying to do with the feasibility study, with the sovereignty grant, is about how do we make the best use of the money that we got to improve outcomes. I mean, if you look at this, we should have one of the richest school systems in the whole country. But when you look at outcomes, there's a big misfire here. And these are some of the steps that the feasibility study team talked about the path forward, about what the next 2 years is going to involve is part of the whole planning process. Collecting more